14 minutes. That's what the red numbers say. The item's sitting in your cart, you haven't even finished reading the description, and your thumb is already sliding toward the buy button. Stop for 1 second and notice that. Your thumb moved before your brain finished the sentence. That's not you being careless. That's not weak willpower. That's a switch getting flipped inside your skull, on purpose, by someone who studies exactly how to flip it. There's a gremlin behind that countdown, and in a moment you'll get his real name and the exact mechanism he uses to turn a ticking clock into a buying decision you never actually made, plus the two-step counter-move that beats him at his own speed. But here's what should genuinely unsettle you. Even after you catch him, even after you watch his deadline reset right in front of your eyes, he still gets to you. By the end, you'll know exactly why knowing the trick isn't the same as being immune to it, and what actually is. For now, just watch the numbers. 14, 13, 12. Red numbers, ticking down. 14 minutes, 13, 12. The item's already in your cart. You haven't even finished reading the description, but your thumb is already drifting toward the button. Notice that. Your thumb moved before your brain finished the sentence. That's not carelessness. That's not weak willpower. That's a very specific, very deliberate psychological switch getting flipped inside your skull. And it has a name. Call him the Clock Gremlin. His entire job is to shrink the gap between seeing a price and paying it, and he does it by convincing your brain that time, not money, is the thing you're about to lose. Here's his mechanism. Behavioral scientists call it the Scarcity Principle, made famous by psychologist Robert Cialdini. The less available something appears, the more valuable your brain assumes it must be. Doesn't matter if it's actually rare. Your brain doesn't audit inventory. It just pattern matches limited to important and stops asking further questions. The Clock Gremlin doesn't need the product to be scarce. He just needs a number counting down in red, because your brain reads urgency as evidence, not as decoration. But the real trick isn't scarcity alone. It's what scarcity does to how you frame the choice. Normally, buying something feels like a gain. You get a thing. Under a countdown, the frame flips. Now not buying feels like a loss. You lose the deal, the price, the moment. And loss aversion, research suggests losing something can hurt roughly twice as much as an equivalent gain feels good. Means your brain will now work harder to avoid that loss than it ever worked to earn the gain in the first place. The Clock Gremlin didn't sell you a product, he sold you a deadline. You can watch this exact effect outside a checkout page too. In a classic scarcity experiment, researchers offered people identical cookies from 2 jars, one nearly empty, one nearly full. Same cookies, same taste. People consistently rated the cookies from the almost empty jar as more desirable. Nothing about the cookie changed, only the appearance of running out changed. That's the entire Clock Gremlin playbook, just wearing a different costume. Manufacture the appearance of running out, and the desire follows automatically, whether or not the scarcity is real. And often it isn't real. UX researcher Harry Brignall coined the term dark patterns to describe interface tricks built specifically to manipulate you into decisions you wouldn't otherwise make, and fake countdown timers are one of the most common. Refresh the checkout page. Does the clock reset back to 14 minutes? If it does, there was never a deadline. There was only a gremlin wearing a stopwatch, hoping you wouldn't check. So here's a real question worth sitting with. Think back to the last thing you bought under a ticking clock. Did you actually need it? Or did you just need the feeling of not losing it? There's no wrong answer, but naming the moment out loud, even just to yourself in the comments, is usually the first crack in the Clock Gremlin's routine. Here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. Even after you know the timer is fake, even after you've watched it reset on refresh, it still works on you. Why? Because the Clock Gremlin was never negotiating with the part of your brain that reads facts. He was talking directly to your amygdala, one of the brain's rapid threat detection systems, which treats running out of time as urgent regardless of whether you consciously believe the countdown. Knowledge doesn't disarm a threat response. Only time and distance do. That's the real design flaw the clock gremlin is exploiting. Your prefrontal cortex, the part that weighs cost against value, is simply slower than your alarm system. The clock is built to make you act before that slower, wiser process even gets a vote. Regret shows up later precisely because the rational review you needed happened after the purchase, not before it. So the countermove has to happen at the same speed as the trick. First, before you buy anything under a countdown, refresh the page once. If the timer resets, you've just watched the deadline evaporate in real time, and that alone often breaks the spell because you're no longer reacting to urgency, you're reacting to evidence. Second, and this is the one that actually holds up under pressure, give yourself a real, self-imposed cooldown that's longer than the fake one. Close the tab, set your own timer, 10 minutes on your phone, not theirs. If the item still matters to you once your own clock runs out, buy it with a clear head. The clock gremlin's whole power depends on borrowing your urgency. Once you're running the countdown instead of him, he's got nothing left to sell you but the truth. It could always wait. Tell me in the comments, what's the last purchase you'd genuinely take back if you'd just given yourself those 10 minutes first?